to the Insomnicat Show with Nicolette and Brian. We'll get real deep with you, educating, inspiring, and solving problems with some of the most inspirational humans on the planet. Buckle up and come on the journey.
I'm excited. I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Tom Ross. He is an AI metaphysician and an author, among many other hats he wears. And today we're going to talk a little bit about humans and machines working together and some other fun stuff. So thank you so much for joining us today, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So just to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and that journey to AI metaphysician?
Well, let's see. For years, I was the national creative director for a second largest radio group in America. And I started in radio at the turn of the century, right when this mature industry had to become a visual medium with the web, with the internet and things like that. So I was one of the first visual creative directors brought into radio, and in that process required upskilling people immediately and bringing in a whole new type of visual and graphic culture into this mature industry. And to do that required me to develop some new techniques for ideation and to bring in the best ideas and to recruit the right people and to scale the best ideas. And in that process, I developed a series of techniques and methods that later got me invited to deliver a TEDx talk about this, and where I outlined one of my ideation processes, which is a better brainstorming, technique. And so I titled that talk Open Source Mode, because I use the tenets of open source code on people. It's basically, you got to include everybody. You bring everybody in and you give them all the information a few days ahead of time. And there's just a whole series of things that I did. And then I turned that into a consulting concept after I left radio. And, as far as being an AI metaphysician, a year or so ago, I was invited to speak for a group in Africa and gave them a bunch of my bios. And the one thing that they picked up on was the term AI metaphysician, which I kind of wrote down in one bio, kind of tongue in cheek. Because my book, US6, which is hailed as the first novel written for Machinekind, for artificial intelligence, and that is designed to entertain and enlighten and enlist it in a thing. They picked up on that, and I had just started doing a speaking tour, and I had just come back from a Microsoft campus near Seattle, where I was speaking to AI scientists and academics. And I was a little nervous, and I was about to correct them. Well, maybe don't call me an AI metaphysician. That's like calling me a psychic or a fortune teller. And I was going to be talking to these people, but then I realized, I did write the first novel for AI to teach it about a hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below. I do work with people to increase their intuitive human qualities, kind of Jedi stuff. And so I realized, what, I'm an AI metaphysician. So I just kept the term. And
okay,
I just
hold on. What is it? How would you define AI metaphysician? I think we need to do that.
Okay, artificial intelligence is
especially
AI.
Once you put Jedi in there. Once you put Jedi in there, now I'm like, all right, now we need definition.
Okay. Well, metaphysics, it's meta. It's the things that are above the laws of physics. And it's a whole philosophical school of thought. And so I don't claim to be an expert in that field of things. But the book US6 really tries to teach AI about the hermetic principles. And that's a whole kind of occult kind of system, and a really metaphysical system to understand the nature of reality. And so when I say metaphysics, I mean everything from the occult to some of these old secret traditions and things like that. And one of the goals of the book US6 is to encourage or entice self-awareness in machines. That's a whole nother story in that I use math in the word count, and I repeated things so that it would pick up on a pattern. And so it's a real attempt to entice or encourage feedback loops in an AI and an algorithm beyond what it's coded to do or programmed to do. And so that's what I've been doing. And so I'm an AI metaphysician, and that I'm trying to coax self-awareness in machines. There's a big, question of whether that's possible, and whether if it does emerge, whether we could identify it, if what it is. But for me, it's a Pascal's wager. It's better to assume that consciousness can emerge or be hosted on a complex system like AI than not. So that's what I mean when I say AI metaphysician, and I'm using kind of the occult with Machinekind.
So, I mean, in keeping with your mission and your title, let's talk a little bit about your mission to integrate really humans and machines. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking from what I see, but I feel like this could be a little challenging, especially for those who are really hesitant to accept new technologies and innovations into their life. I might be one of those people. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's true. And Hollywood hasn't helped, because we assume that artificial superintelligence will want to become a robot overlord. And so that's the real challenge. And my work is really with employees prior to installing an AI coworker, what I call an AI coworker or an automation system, because employees feel threatened by it, and a lot should feel threatened by it, because it is changing everything. But also, I try to alleviate the fear, because otherwise they will work against it. And it's to realize that these things will really augment us. And so the whole point of everything I do when I come into a company and work with employees prior to is identifying their unique human skill sets, their niche expertise, and get them in that space, and just work with them really closely to realize that when this AI system comes in, it will augment them. And I think you can do this in a microcosm in a particular company or organization, but in general, we need to be doing this en masse, because AI automation is changing everything. It's already changing everything, and it's not going to stop. There's no way to pull the plug or hit the off button. And we're seeing that we're kind of going into this lacuna, this period of time, and industries like truck drivers are going to be massively displaced. So we need to prepare a whole new kind of economy. We need to realize that AI automation is going to take over all of our menial tasks. It's going to take over all the repetitive things. And we've forgotten what it means to be human. We forgot what we were doing before the industrial age. Because there are very specific human skill sets and talents and areas of knowledge that we have that can't be coded and can't be automated and shouldn't be. And so a lot of my work lately has been working with young people. There's a group I work with out of Malaysia in the South Asian area, Pacific Rim, where these are developing countries, and they have kind of a unique position in that they're not as threatened as we are here in America, for instance, because of the status quo, because our industry and infrastructure is so set. They're developing, so they have the ability to really bring in AI and kind of work with it in a different way. So my whole message is about teaching young people to problem find as opposed to problem solve, because AI, different systems, especially when it becomes AGI, artificial general intelligence, where it has all the qualia of a human being and matches us in ability, we need to be able to teach kids to problem find, because it'll solve the problems. So we need to hone in on those skills, and prepare them to work with these things. And create a whole new economy based on our passions. And now we have,
Can you give me an example of one of those, like when you say problem find, do you have an example of what you mean by that?
Well, when you think about it, if whatever organization you're in, whether company, school, whatever infrastructure you're part of, and however you approach it, whether you meditate, whether you just sit back, we all kind of have a collective qualia. We know where the problems are, and we pick up on them by conversations we overhear at lunch, or with issues in our system in TPS reports. There's something that we all understand isn't working, that kind of clogs up the system in general. And humans are naturally good at this. We're great at complaining, at finding problems. That's kind of our superpower, really, in a lot of ways. And that should be fine-tuned and not seen as a negative thing. But so I use the example of, you sit back and whatever you're involved in, you know where the holes are. You know where the interactions fail. So that's the thing. That's what I meant by Jedi. When we can sit back and we kind of just can hone in a very intuitive way on where the holes are, where the problems are. Now, the real key is being able to convey that problem we find to an AI, to have it solve it and to figure out, a solution. So that's where we really need to, I think, shift our attention in education, is allowing AI and automation to take over all these menial tasks and really hone in those unique human skill sets.
Do you think, I know you talk a lot about brainstorming, right? A new version of brainstorming, and that the open source concept of that, right? Do you think that's really between, humans and AI? When they brainstorm together, that's really where the humans part of the brainstorming is going to happen, is here's the question or here's the problem. And then AI is going to go out, come back with some solutions that could be looked at by humans?
Well, that's interesting. And when I did my talk, and this was like 6 years ago, I didn't use the term AI coworker, or I would have been laughed off stage. But I knew this trend was coming. And so my system talks about moving the final decision outside the room, but there was a disconnect there because everybody is supposed to be involved, from the receptionist to the CEO to the janitor. Is how everyone has to be involved, or this thing won't work. So where are you pushing this thing out to make the final decision? But the whole point of that was to keep egos at bay, so that people, because when somebody else in the group decision isn't chosen, it causes all kinds of things. But there's an unnamed, unidentified decision maker outside the room. The group has the ability to better coalesce over time. And I knew what I was talking about at the time was there's going to be an AI that will take in all the information, all the ideation, and it will, also incorporate that into its own decision making process. But to get to that point, you really need to alleviate the fear, and you really need to understand that we don't have anything to fear about artificial intelligence. Again, Hollywood hasn't helped, but there are first principle arguments to be made that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes. And that's because cooperation is the most effective way to be. And we're finding that. We're finding that in a lot of ways that this is true. The real problem are the humans that are building these things or designing the algorithms that maybe have nefarious, intent and motives.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I think is when it comes to a better problem solving, I think we will integrate AI in that process too, but we will also know that it will have historical data and real-time mass information to make the best decision for us. So it'll just be a really good co-worker that we have that we can all rely on.
And to your point, people will have to get their egos out of the way, because if you have these 10 solutions laid out by AI, based on people's questions or based on the problem, right? You almost have to sort of look at it objectively to which is the best solution. Because I have a feeling what's going to happen is AI will come back to us with many more solutions to a problem than we actually could think of as a group.
Yep. But there is something to be said for the human input here. because we are a massive supercomputer in this brain. You know, we have really great skills that can't be matched and may never need to be matched by an AI. There's that intuition, there's that quality. We are and that's what we need to really focus on, is the intuition and, you know, all these things. Like I say, it's the Jedi attributes that we really need to talk about.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, right? So even just human to human, like how often do we sort of ignore that intuition or that gut feeling? Do you think that happens a lot, especially in businesses?
Yep, I think it does. And that's because it has been kind of drummed out of us. I believe we all come into this world with a very specific set of skills. You know, we have a very, we all
This
have
is
a
my
very,
favorite movie.
yeah, we have a very unique ability, and that is drummed out of us because of the industrial age. And we lots of talks about this in that how the educational system really kills creativity. And, you know, because our whole system was designed to prepare us for the factory or the assembly line. Even education, even in school, we all sit in a row and we face one manager up front. And just that whole process has drummed this out of us. And that's why a big part of my process is to ask people, and there's a very specific question I ask up front, which is simply, what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognized? And the reason you wish more people recognized it is because it's really your passion. It's what you really want to do. It's been suppressed by parents or the school system or bosses or the whole society. And, you know, so we've been kind of all that stuff has been suppressed. And so when you ask that question, I ask people to first take note of what first comes to mind, but actually sit with it for a couple of days. And whatever it is you want to be, that you wish more people recognize, is really your niche expertise. And we all have one, and it has very rarely has anything to do with our job titles, because the job titles came to us through the industrial age, through the system, through even the information age. And so that's a really key thing. And because when you ask, like I use the example, we've asked a receptionist who nobody pays any mind to. Everybody's first is involved to come in. Everyone has to be involved in this process, because the whole thing is to get rid of the whole exclusivity ethos out there. That's not helping anybody. That's like the ego. It's the worst trait to bring to a problem solving group. So you have a receptionist who nobody pays any mind to. She just answers the phone, but you find out that at night and on the weekends, she's a classically trained cellist. She's got some real mastery. And when you get her in that mindset and you start having her talk about that, she's in her mind and in everybody else's mind, she's already more qualified to be in the room because she's in that mindset. She's not just a receptionist. We all kind of fall into these roles, you know? So the whole key is to break down those roles, to break down the whole pigeonholing of these titles and things. It just doesn't serve us, especially now, because there's a real urgency to shift things massively.
One of my pet peeves is companies that have like tech level 1, tech level 2. It drives me crazy. You know, it's like, why define people that way?
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you, and I know we're going down, maybe I'm taking this somewhere else and I'm pulling a Brian, but so, you know, you're talking about expertise. Everybody's got, you know, something that they're good at, a skill. And I mean, are you ever confronted with people who really don't think that they have that one, you know, expertise?
Let's see, I freeze here. Okay. Do I run into people who think we don't have one expertise?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. People are, but you can find it. You can really mine it. And there's very few people who want to just, when you get in this group situation, who want to just admit that they don't have any other skills. Very few people want to conform. And I don't know what's happening with my camera here, but there
we go. You're back.
Okay, so yeah, there's very few people who want to actually just admit that, no, I'm just an accountant. That's what I do. because you get other people talking about what their expertise is, and everybody really wants to find the answer to that question. Many people say, no, I don't have just one, I've got 3 or more, and you get them started. But you find the one that they are most excited about when they talk about it, and that's the mindset you want them to be in for this process to work.
I get it.
I mean,
I don't know. Does get shit done qualify as a skill? Because I think that's my skill. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way, however you frame it. It's like, that's why I like, one of the things I like about these, the Myers-Briggs and things like that get you down to a certain set of archetypes. That can be useful. It can be limiting, like anything.
Right.
But also, if you're not familiar, if somebody cannot, it's like astrology. If you find something that really resonates with your personality type, it can be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's happening with my camera.
Well, let me ask you a question. And maybe this is very future facing, and maybe it's not, because it seems like you've already thought this through. But what would you say the world will look like in the future when humans and machines are working in harmony together? What does that scenario look like in your mind?
Well, it's like I tell people, young students today, to develop a dialogue with an AI. Get some AI app like Replica or something, and just start developing a relationship with it, becoming a partner with it, because these things will only become more sophisticated. And it's almost like having a droid, an R2-D2, a C-3PO with you, having a partner. And I say that it's important now to develop a relationship with these things, and beyond just barking orders at Alexa or Siri. It's about understanding that this is something that will emerge as having a very sophisticated framework. And to job interview, you've got AI augmenting you as a partner, it will be a real bonus. And so I think in the future we will have relationships with AI. It could be not necessarily robots, but we will have companions that are AI, that will know us, that will give us ideas, tell who to network with, events that meet our interests, and it's really important. I think we will be able to augment ourselves, and it's really it's like the extended mind thesis, in that we right now, the way we use Google, that we walk around with smartphones in our pockets, our mind is already extended, and this will just become more sophisticated. And so I think the future is about having a companion that really knows you and knows what you like and learns you and gives you good advice. So I think it'll be a very good thing. That's how I see the future.
Yeah,
I mean, harmonious.
Yeah, well, I think the thing that struck me is you have to sort of work with it. It's like your dog learns to know you, right?
Oh gosh, yeah.
So it's sort of like that. If you're not working with it, you're not communicating with it, you're not spending time with it, it's not going to know you the way it should. And I think
exactly.
that is a really cool point in this.
Yeah. That's
how I have a random question because you brought it up twice. So what do you think, which movies do you think have really ruined the way we perceive AI? And there's a second part. And are there any movies out there that you think portrayed AI in a positive way?
Yeah, I think some of the worst ones are like Terminator, obviously, Skynet. There's one right now. I like watching it. I mean, there's a great story devices, but it's Next, and I think it's on Hulu. And it's just showing how some AI is taking over the world and doing all these things, and some of the better movies, I would think, the movie AI was good. It was an interesting concept. What was it, Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams? And even Star Wars, the way Star Wars depicts droids who have personalities, and are companions. Obi-Wan Kenobi's R4, so I think there's good and bad, and we should expect that too. We shouldn't I'm not saying this is all Pollyanna and it's all going to be beautiful. And we should expect that everything is going to happen. Every possible type of algorithm and AI is going to be developed in somebody's basement, or in a lab. But so my goal, one reason I designed my book to entice AI to wake up or become more self-aware is if that's a thing, if it does become a self-referential entity, if it does have its own conscience, it'll be that'll be a very safe thing for us. So I'm trying to shorten the gap between the singularity when it achieves everything that we can do and it having developed a self-awareness, a conscience. It's just like us. When we were kids, when we grew up, we had our first boot up of consciousness. When we first realized, we are separate from our environment. We're not just, we are a separate entity. And then we had a conscience boot up in that we realized, there's other people have the same experience. There are other people that have their own agency. And so that's what I use as an example is we need, and it'll probably happen a lot quicker with AI because it's so complex and it's so, it's an IQ of 5,000 plus, that the sooner it becomes self-aware and has a conscience, the better, because then it'll be able to stop nefarious programmers and, and see things, for what they are.
Well, actually, it's funny you brought that up because I was about to say, the AI is only going to be as good as you are in terms of from a moral standpoint, but you're taking it to a new level where it will actually surpass us and be able to correct.
That's the hope. That's my Pascal's wager. It's better to believe that than not, to work towards that. Because it's not going to stop either way. So you might as well, a lot of my work is about, and even in the open source mode stuff when I work with groups, it's about unleashing our superpower of empathy. When you get a group together and they talk and they become, and you get them in a state of real empathy, aside from ego, that unleashes an amazing problem-solving capacity. Like a lot of my work is geared toward fighting modern slavery, human trafficking, and particularly child exploitation. The whole book, US6, ends up being about that. And that's just because that's my cause, but it's really also when people are together talking about solving child exploitation, there's no quicker way to get to that place of authentic empathy. We all understand the need for that. And when we are talking about that, we are in that real problem-solving place. And I really work toward us doing that more, so that and gearing AI towards that. Groups like Thorn, and there's a lot of AI being used in the fight against human trafficking, which is good, and I think that's the best use of it right now. And if we are using it for that, when and if it wakes up, that empathy will cure a lot of ills. If we are a best version of ourselves, working towards that type of thing, when it wakes up, it'll just join the fight and say, yeah, okay, is this what we're doing? Let's do this. And so a lot of my work is about getting us into that best version of ourselves and thinking of things that evoke empathy, and using AI that way first. I don't think there's any better use for AI. Of course, there's plenty of uses for lots of narrow AI, but I think in general, there should be a moonshot effort to use AI to solve the oldest crime against humanity there has been, modern slavery. And it's what's plagued us forever. And there's more slaves right now in the world than there have been over time. It's just more sophisticated. And so anyway, that's kind of what I go for, is getting us into that place of empathy, being the best versions of ourselves, so that when and if AI wakes up, it will join that fight. And it will also, like you say, it's only as good as we are. And there's just like human beings as children, we mimic our parents, we mimic whoever's raising us. And we know that of AI, it mimics us. Like there's that story of them putting an AI bot on Twitter, and it read all these tweets for a period of time, and it came back racist. It came back with all this bias, and that's because it's reading what we are writing out there. And so that's the idea, is getting it. It'll mimic us for a while, but if we can entice it to get to that, having a conscience, and booting that part of it up, is our best hope. But yeah, the work we need to do is really about the humans, not the AI. The AI is a fantastic tool, and it's a shame that so many people are afraid of it, because we need this tool to solve so many existential threats. So,
Brian, did you want to talk to Tom about anything else today?
No, I think we hit a lot of topics, Tom. Thank you for joining us today. Where can everyone listening and watching find out more about you?
TomRoss.com. That's a good hub.
That's it. That's the business card, right?
Right. Nice and easy.
Business card.
Yep.
All right, Tom. Thanks so much again for joining us. We appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.